Hello. In this episode, Mark is sharing his path from New York all the way to the old continent. Listen how his adventures from Los Angeles, London, Hong Kong, and Paris shaped him as the person he is today. Learn what asset management means, and listen how he shares some great advice on taking risk and living abroad early in your career. Enjoy. Okay, Mark, thanks a lot for joining my podcast. So it would be awesome if you could give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm quite happy to be here. So my name is Mark Barry. I'm 54 almost. In November, I'll be 54.
Congrats.
I will be living abroad now for the past 30 years. I started my studies. I did my initial studies to be a commercial airline pilot. That was my dream since I was a little boy. I did it, I completed it. And unfortunately, when I started to work, I had some health problems with my sinuses, so I had to give it up. So I reinvented myself to the first time to Mark 2.0 and went to work for an American investment bank in New York City, which I worked there for about 18 months. And then I got accepted into an international MBA program in California. So I moved out to Los Angeles. Great opportunity. As part of that, I came to France to do an internship where I did my internship at the company that owns Charles de Gaulle Airport. So it was quite an interesting thing. I kept the fun of the aviation, but was doing project work at the airport. When my MBA was done, I was supposed to go back to work for the American Bank in New York. But after having been in Paris that time for about a year, I decided I wanted to stay abroad. So I got a job working for the bank in Paris, France. Initially, I was working in a team that was sort of like an internal consulting group, which was a great opportunity because they gave me the chance to see all different parts of the investment banking and private banking arena, and eventually stayed with them until the late 90s when I had the opportunity with three friends to start an internet startup. We started an internet bank, the first internet bank in France, a truly internet bank. There was no brick and mortar. We did that quite well. We were quite happy. All things were going well. We had an investor who, over the term of the life, gave us equivalent of 1 billion French francs. So that was 165 million euros. And things went well up until September 11th, when the world changed for many people, including ourselves, and our investor needed to pull out his money. So he sold his shares to a UK internet bank, and eventually we sold our shares and we all left by 2004. After that, I spent a short stint at a British bank in Paris, and then eventually to my current job, which I've been there now over 15 years, which is a French asset manager. And initially starting off as head of operations, global head of operations. Now I'm head of global client service. So quite a bigger range and changes over the past 30 years. And that's where we are as of today.
Awesome stuff, Mark. And so you've been based in the States, on the East, on the West,
yes.
Europe.
Yes, and I forgot to mention to your effect. Thank you for reminding me that I'm based here in Paris, but when you work in finance, you spend a lot of time, and I did live a while in London, part of my role. And then in 2011, 2012, with my current company, I had the fantastic opportunity to live in Hong Kong.
Yeah, we're going to touch that. I had Albert on my podcast, and we were discussing about London and New York, as those cities are like alpha plus cities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you are a young professional, these are the places where you should be. So you've been.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Mark. So let's start all the way back. First of all, congrats on your background. I mean, it sounds really cool. You wanted to be a pilot, yet investment banking is more profitable or what? No.
Well, well, yes, you're right. No, there's many different things. I mean, when you're young and you have a dream, and you go through your studies, and you come, you arrive at your diploma, and you arrive at your achievement. Sometimes the reality doesn't necessarily fit what you expected of it. And although I would have been happy to stay in aviation, there was physical reasons why I couldn't. So I had to reinvent myself and change it. I could have gone to work for an airline in some sort of managerial, but I thought to myself, well, first of all, I guess I'd find it a little bit depressing. Whereas I wanted to fly the plane, now I'd be sitting in an office watching the plane take off. And then in another way, you're right, is studies in the United States, for example, are much, much more expensive than other countries, and you have to pay that. And as a student, I had taken some loans. I had scholarships, but I had some loans to pay off. And eventually, financial services, investment banking, did pay much more than working for an airline. So the choice was a little bit clear at that point.
Okay, good thing you touched I mean, so you graduated with quite a student debt. Yeah, I mean, especially in the States, it's quite difficult. Thanks to that, or because of that, what was your approach? I mean, when you're looking for a job, I mean, were you quite relaxed? Okay, I'm gonna take my time. Did you have this pressure of, okay, I need to find a job. I need to find a really well-paid job just to get rid of my student debt? What was your thought process at the time?
I would say it certainly does add pressure, because you know that you have to pay a loan back on a monthly basis. But it wasn't necessarily my only criteria. I wasn't going to take a job just to get the money to do that, to pay off my loan. I looked at, well, one, I knew I wanted to stay in this country, and that was my first criteria. Would a company help me stay in this country? Now, I was fortunate. I have dual citizenship with Ireland, so that reduced the pressure, because with the European Union, I was able to stay. So that took away pressure, that I can look for a company. And I wanted an American company, because I'm American, and I thought it would be easier to adapt into the work culture. And so I found an international company based here in Paris that wanted me. I had good opportunities. As I really wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, I really liked the idea of working within the internal consulting group, because that allowed me the opportunity to do that. So more or less, I did have a slight pressure to find a job in order to pay the bills, but I had the leisure to pick a job that I thought would be going in the right direction for me.
Okay, cool. So you're in New York. You're working for this amazing bank. You already finished your MBA, or you're gonna?
No, when I was working in New York, I do what a lot of New Yorkers do. I started to do an MBA at night, going to work, and then at night going to classes, and that was not working for me.
Yeah.
I'm a person that needs to sit in the room during school hours, because one, when you're working, if you have a deadline, you cannot pick up and leave and go to class at night. And if you can't give your full attention to your education, I don't think it's worth spending the money. So I spoke to my boss at that point, and I had gotten a scholarship to go out to California to do this international business degree in MIB/MBA. And they agreed to let me take a leave of absence to go do this. And as part of that, I got to go to France. So I preferred to go full time. For me, it was just the way I am.
Okay, and why did you want to do an MBA?
Well, that's a very good question. I ask myself now, was it worth it? Yes and no. I mean, why I want to do an MBA is because in the 1990s in New York, in finance, if you wanted to go up the ladder within a company, you needed to have those three letters after your name and your diploma. So that was one thing to push me towards it. I think it was a fantastic experience, primarily because of the people I met and my classmates and my professors. We had some really interesting professors. But in practice, when I look back and I said, was it worth the money? I'm not sure. I mean, it really depends on what you get out of it. My thing is, it didn't matter the money because it was just the people I met and the experiences I have. And if it wasn't for this MBA, I wouldn't have got to France. And I would never have imagined myself. Yeah, exactly. There you go. See the flag. I see you like France too. I would never have imagined myself 40 years ago when I was in high school thinking one day I'd be living on the other side of the pond here in Europe.
Would you advise other younger professionals to do an MBA? Do you think it's still the same thing?
I think it's a very personal decision because every individual is different. Okay. Yeah. And some people need to have the additional education to help them down the road, whether it be from just confidence. Sometimes people lack the confidence to go for a job, but they get the confidence when they actually get the diploma. There's other people who gain a lot of knowledge from it. There's other people who are just born to be successful leaders and have it inherent in their DNA and maybe do not need the diploma because they have the way of doing it. So it's I think it's a personal thing for each person. But I would say that if you're going to do an MBA, it's the question of timing, when to do it. I did it very early on, primarily because I was not really sure where I wanted to go, and I thought it would be a way to give me direction, and it did help me. But I think looking back, I think I would have waited a couple of more years when I had more experience in the workplace to be able to challenge things during the classes we had in the master's level. So, but every individual is different. There were people in the class when I was in my early 20s. There were people in their late 30s, early 40s doing the MBA in the same class, and each of us got something out of it very different.
Right. Before going next, would you have some knowledge to share here? I mean, in terms of working in New York, in a big bank, how do you call these banks? I mean, bulge brackets. What do you have to share over here? Okay, you've done that, and
well, first of all, the best thing, and I think that one of the most important things for anybody is the idea of changing places, cool. Picking up, moving, experiencing new cultures, meeting new people, new ways of thinking, and even from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast of the United States, that's practically going across a continent, but it's going across a continent. But there's very big mentality differences even between those two areas. Then moving over to France, you have the language challenge, you have the cultural challenge, and then even 500 kilometers or even less than 500 kilometers from Paris, you go to London, very different people, different ways of looking at the same problem, different approaches. So I think that the idea of picking up and moving, especially at a young age, well, at any age, we're never too old to change and adapt. That's one of the best things that you could do, is really experience. And if you have the opportunity to go abroad for education, for your job, I would certainly seize the opportunity, because you'll never regret it. Even though sometimes it might be hard. I know when I first arrived in France, I wasn't a big fan, to be very honest. I was young, I was lonely, I didn't speak the language, I didn't like the food because I'm not a big cheese person. I was looking for McDonald's, and they didn't have. Yeah. But in the end, after I stayed here after 6 months, I really started to open my heart up to the culture. I started to learn the language. I now speak fluently. I have a very thick New York or Brooklyn accent when I speak French, but it's a great opportunity, and I'm very happy to be here. And the same thing happened when I went to live in Asia. I really loved Hong Kong, and the opportunity that I had there was more or less during financial crisis periods when it was sort of difficult. And the one thing I loved about the Hong Kong Chinese was their work ethic, is that they always work harder. They worked harder because they felt that in a crisis, if we get down, it would just get worse. So you have to work harder. And it was very inspiring, very inspiring. And again, I never thought 30, 40 years ago that I would have had the opportunity to live there. And I came back completely motivated and enthralled about working even more abroad than I had been before.
I was listening to another podcast, and a guy was saying that it's difficult to move and change
Mm-hmm.
places, and we find more reasons not to move. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, which is interesting. So you moved from the States. You moved to Europe. You're based in Paris.
There's a company called Aéroport de Paris,
Yeah.
ADP, that owns the two major airports in Paris, Charles de Gaulle and Orly. And so my internship was working in the real estate department at Charles de Gaulle Airport, looking on how we could use the land around the airport that wasn't being used yet for future runways, and do studies. Could we use it for like plants and flowers? Then also at that time, they were building some new buildings at the airport, working on how to commercialize them to try to attract foreign companies to come there. So it was quite an interesting job. The difficult part was it was a very, very French company, and my French was non-existent. So it was very, very, very tough. But it was a great experience because it challenged me. It brought me to my fear of not being accepted or understood with the people around me. They didn't understand me, but they were kind and they helped me. And eventually, I got to learn the language better and better, and then eventually we were able to.
Okay, so after you finished working in the aviation, you
Mhm.
went back to the same bank in
Yes, I
Paris.
went back to the same bank. I was supposed to go back to New York, and as I said, that was more or less a year now that I had been in France, and I sort of fell in love with the living abroad, and in particular living and working in Paris. So I asked if I could get a job in Paris, and that they fortunately, I had to wait a little while until they found the right job, and I got the job in Paris, and it was probably the best thing to happen to me because one, it got me to stay here.
Yeah. What was the thought process of, I mean, it's a big decision, isn't it? Moving from New York to Paris. You, you were alone. Um,
Yeah,
did you have so many resources back then? I mean, going on the internet, going on any platforms just to do your research. I mean, especially when it comes to France. Yeah, I mean, working in France and French. Yeah, it's not that easy. How did you? I assume you had colleagues, so you reached out to colleagues within the bank. Okay, guys, how is it? How's the office in Paris? Is it? What are the conditions?
you would think so, but I didn't.
You didn't.
No, because I
Yeah.
didn't know anybody really at that point. And plus, I was a junior type of person. So, how it all really worked out is my initial move was to California. So, that for me was an easy move because it's in the same culture and it was in an environment with school, university.
Right.
So, you're there with people more or less your own age. The range was from the mid 20s to the late 30s. And we all had the common interest to do our MBA. So actually, when I said I came alone, I was alone because I didn't have my family, but I actually had 20 some odd colleagues who were in the same situation, who lived all different places in Paris. Okay. And effectively, we didn't have the internet like you did today. Even if you look at the computers, we didn't have laptops. We didn't. We had the old mobile phones that were really long, etc. If you had a mobile phone, I didn't have a mobile phone. A lot of the any kind of research we did was just primarily looking at books and trying to understand. And I guess I thought to myself, it's coming to France for a year. It'll be an experience. I don't know what to expect. I wasn't afraid because I knew I could always go home if it didn't work out. I could go home to live with my parents or whatever. But it was a little bit all by chance. It was taking a risk, and I like the idea.
Skin in the game. No.
Yeah, exactly. But as you said earlier, Stefan, one of your friends or colleagues had said it's harder as you get older. And I would agree with that. And that's why I think if you're young, and you're young, you don't have the same types of pressures as you do when you're older. So you can pick up and you can leave and do different things. And as we get older, people have a tendency then to buy houses, and they have things which will anchor them into a place where they are, or they have a wife or husband, and then they have children, and then it's not the same dynamics. When you're young, it's great. You can pick up and do whatever you want and go wherever it is and not take the same type of risks.
It's interesting. So you've been mentioning you already had your friends from school, right? So you didn't have internet, but you had friends. You had a network. Let's call it like that. How
Mm-hmm.
important was for you having these people around you?
Oh, it was your complete support structure, because when you're away far from your family in a new country where you don't speak the language, it can be depressing very quickly. So either you have people that you can speak with who could support you during those low periods, or you have the type of personality, and there's plenty of people out there who have personalities that are very strong and can just pick up and walk away and do different things. I'm not a weak person. I don't think I'm a weak person. I have if I was down, I used to just pick up and walk the streets of Paris, because one, no matter how bad you feel or depressed you might be, when you walk the streets of Paris, you see all this history and this beauty that you brings a smile to my face anyhow. But it's always nice to have friends and somebody you can call and speak to. So that support structure was very nice. What had happened though is, in the end, after everybody graduated, we were 20 some odd students, and from like 10 different countries, everybody went. And then you found yourself a little bit alone. But then I had my job, so I made different friends. But it's always good to have some sort of a support structure, somebody you can count on.
Right, right. So you're living in Paris. What was it like being a professional in Paris?
Well, let's put it this way: it was a big change than going from California, where at that point I had shared a house, a 3-bedroom house with 2 roommates, to come to Paris to a small 30 square meter apartment for the same price I was paying for a 150 square meter apartment or house in California. So that was a very big change. From a work aspect, I the transition from an American company, then doing my internship at a French company, and then going back into an American work environment in a French subsidiary, uh, I preferred it because I felt more at ease, because the language at work was more or less English, because everything was international. So it was brought me back a little bit more into my comfort zone, and I liked the American work ethic of working very hard. And we used to work on projects which were great international, with Asia, the US, and Europe. And I would be at work at 6:30 in the morning, and we'd get out at 11:30 at night. But it didn't matter, because it was so much fun and so exciting that I didn't see the time go by. So it was a good period. I have very fond memories of my first years in France because of that experience.
Would you point out some differences when it comes to work environment?
Well, yeah, people had the impression, that the French work less than the Americans. Okay, and that's what I had thought, and it was exact opposite. Because when I was working in New York, you'd come into the office at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, but by 5 o'clock, everybody was going home, and we would have dinner very early. Okay, in France, generally everybody would come in about 9:30, but they would not leave until after 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So I was really, I had this false impression that it was going to be easy. And so we have all this vacation time. Yes, effectively, there's a lot of vacation time compared to the US, which was very nice. But I think it's also, it's normal based on the amount of energy that people put into it. So I think the perceptions that I had were sort of false. In the end, the dynamics were were different, but also very exciting. I think the French in general are very strong technically. It's an engineering type of society, so they're very good intellectually, very smart people, uh, good good workers, hard workers. I think like Americans, they just get a bad rap. Some people don't think that they are as efficient as they are.
So you're an American expat living the life in Paris, uh,
Mm-hmm.
following Hemingway and the company. What's next?
That's a good question. You also arrive, well, everybody's different. Everybody has different desires. I think at this point now, I'm 54. I have about 10 years, a little bit less than 10 years until I retire. I
Yeah.
actually like what I do. I love my job. I have a responsibility over 16 countries. I am very fortunate to have good team members. So I'm pretty quite content, which is sort of strange, with what I have today. That being said, if an opportunity arises for a new challenge, maybe I would be interested, within the same company, because I really love my company. I think it's a good company. They're very very good employer that take care of their clients, that take care of their people, and I think I've arrived at a stage where I found contentment. Wow, with what I do, and focus maybe a little bit more on my next stages of life after I have to give up my professional career in 10 years' time.
I think that's really a really interesting subject. Being happy and loving your job. How do you know you're loving your job? I mean, it's
I,
interesting. It's interesting, no? You know on the spot, or you're just looking back and you know what? I really enjoyed my time spent for working for that company.
I
How
think,
did it?
how do you know it? Well, I think it's exactly what you just said. When you think back and if you think back and you smile, I think that's already a good sign. I do not believe I only had one bad experience with one company just before the one I just worked here. That I only stayed a little bit less than a year because it really was not a place for me. It just was not at all it. Otherwise, I think the fact is that if you have learned something and you have developed personally and you've met people that you're still speaking to 20, 30 years down the road, that's a pretty good sign that you like the job. Now for me, the fact that I can wake up every morning and not be scared or sick or not feel well about going to work, if you have any kind of like fears about it, then that's a very bad sign. I mean, work is 1/3 of your day, generally speaking, 1/3 of your life. If you are not enjoying it and you're suffering, then don't let it happen. Learn from it now and quickly change and do something. Nothing is worth harming yourself just for the job or for the money. So for me, it's just the fact is that I really smile every morning when I think I have to go back into the office, or I'm going to have my call with my Hong Kong colleagues every Thursday morning at 8:30. It's my bright spot of the week because it's one of my favorite teams, and I look forward to them. And I've been very fortunate over my career. I have met many nice people, a good amount of people that I'm still in contact with 30 years down the road. So the next phase for me is more or less focusing on me, meaning I think career-wise, I've done achieved what I've wanted to achieve as far as a career. I will continue to work as long as I can, and as long as I'm challenged and enjoy what I'm doing. If I don't enjoy it, just what I just said earlier, I'm not going to pick up and stay in the company. But I didn't plan to go to Hong Kong, and I didn't plan to love it as much as I did. So who knows what's going to happen next year? Maybe there'll be another opportunity elsewhere, and I will be open to thinking about what happens there. So I don't know really, and that's the nice thing about it, is it's the surprise factor which can come up in a year's time. It could actually come up tomorrow. You never know.
Cool, Mark. But let's touch Hong Kong. We didn't touch what.
And touch on.
Yeah, I mean, how did it happen? Yeah.
Well, it was actually I went there for work. with my company on a small like a project for about a month to help. And when I got there, it ended up being much more complicated. So my boss asked me to stay. It wasn't my project. I just happened to participate in the meeting on a project that was running late. And then I realized, having sat into it, is that you had our team in Paris, another team in London, a team in Australia, and a team in Hong Kong, all thinking they were saying the same thing with this project, and in the end they had different understandings. So my boss asked me to stay to help coordinate and translate all those different people to make sure that they were speaking the same language, which is what I did. And it was a fantastic opportunity. It was I think any young person who has the opportunity to go abroad to someplace such as Hong Kong or Asia in general, it's such a vastly different culture. You know, picking up from New York and coming to Paris, yes, you have different languages, or you have a different way of doing things, but you have a commonality. You know, they're languages which are very close, you know, and you go to Asia, Hong Kong is a little bit special because it's very English, but you go to Asia and there's just so much energy and such creativity. It was fantastic, and I think a time in Asia is always very, very beneficial.
How was for you adapting and changing your personal life over there?
In Asia, well, in Hong Kong in particular, and I think the same would apply for Singapore. It's very easy because there's a large expat population. So there's a lot of people in the same situation. They're there for work, and what happens is you go out, you go out, you go out to a bar, you go out to a restaurant, and there you go. You have your wine. At the time when I was there, it was with the Rugby World Cup. And that was a fantastic opportunity because I went out one evening to a bar, at a pub, an English pub, and watched the rugby. And in the end, there was a bunch of different people who eventually became friends. And because they were all in a similar situation, they were there for work or they had just moved their families, and you had an easy way of meeting people. Of course, those are special circumstances. If it was maybe a different place, different time, I might not have been as good of an experience, but it was an experience I certainly never regretted. And I think back at it a lot and saying, wow, that was fantastic. I did so much, learned so much, met so many nice people. And I grew as a person, and I grew professionally from these experiences abroad.
If you would have to compare American mentality, European, especially French, and this time Asian, what would be the main differences?
It's very hard because I think they all have amazing qualities. I think they each have a strong commitment to the work. They have very good work ethics, but there are different ways of showing it. In Asia, people worked long hours. They really worked long hours. I'm not necessarily saying they were more efficient in it, but they really put in the amount of time that they could. Okay, I think in the American side, they bring the enthusiasm and the motivational side. We can win. Yes, we can. Obama type of thing. And then the French bring the technicity.
Yeah.
The mentality, which I think is very good because they're very strong intellectually, and particularly in finance. The French do very well, and they each had very strong things to bring to it. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I think that was one of the things that you learn when you work and live abroad, is that you pick up a little bit of everything from these different cultures. The hard work I picked up maybe in Asia, the American enthusiasm came from my culture, and then the technicity on being professional coming from my experience in France. So that creates the Mark 3.0 in front of you.
Nicely said. Let's describe a bit what asset management means. for
Mhm.
listeners. I mean, I'm an engineer, so most of my listeners, they are in technology. Um, let's explain to them what asset management means, and yeah, investment management. Would you?
Okay, so I'm going to be very simple. It means manage your assets. No,
Where's
what
the
it means
catch? Where's the catch?
is the catch. Yeah, sometimes you can badly manage the assets if you have bad economic downturn. No, quite simply, it is an asset manager will take money from their clients with the goal of making them richer. Okay, generally the types of clients that a firm like ours would have would be large institutional clients who would pool all of the retirement funds money for their employees and would need to invest it in such a way that would guarantee a payment at the end of each month to pay the retired people. Okay, so the role of the asset manager is to accumulate assets for their clients, making them money so that they can pay their underlying clients. So it's it's a really exciting field. Uh, I never would have thought when I was studying to be a pilot that I would end up working in finance and enjoying it. But when you go in and you know that you're taking uh, people's life savings and you're going to help them build their dreams, and you're working on different projects to make sure that it works well and that the challenges that might be faced and the change in the regulations, it's always a challenge, and it's quite exciting. And I think it's a great career opportunity for many different reasons. Engineers can work in asset management companies. You have financial people. You have people who just uh, maybe not have a background at all in finance. Somebody who's working in marketing. You have to do. There's every type of role potentially to have within an asset manager, and it's a very rewarding career. I'm not only talking about financially. I think rewarding from a career perspective because things change, regulations change, people's change, money, the markets change every day. You have to look to see if it's going up and down, and you have the ability within the asset management to see all of that in one day, maybe the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, Mark. You've been mentioning this internet company you started. You
Mm-hmm.
started off in France, right?
Yes.
Let's talk
Yes.
about that too. I mean, I think it's particularly for people my age,
Mm-hmm.
starting a company, especially in the internet field, it's quite
Mm-hmm.
sexy. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, you've been doing that how many years ago? I mean,
That
so,
was 1999 to 2004. It was 5
well,
years.
so why? Okay, let's touch the subject. Why did you want to start this company? How was the process like? Let's elaborate a bit, please.
So it all came about because of a dinner.
French wine and
Yeah, exactly. With a friend of a friend who had an idea he wanted to do, and we all discussed it. And we were four people, and each of us brought four different types of things to the table with different experiences and different backgrounds. And we came up with an idea. We presented it. We found an investor, and it just seemed to work. And at that point, I was 30 years old, and well, 33, and uh, there was no question. It was worth the risk. There was no risk. I mean, if it didn't work, it didn't work, and I've got an amazing experience. And it did work, and it didn't work. I mean, in the sense that we had to unfortunately sell, so I didn't make the hundreds of millions of euros that I was hoping to make and become a Mark Zuckerberg. But it was the most amazing experience to start with four people, and by the time we sold, we were 500 people, and we had offices in Paris and London and a small office in Madrid, um, and all that in a very short period of time. Uh, it's also an emotional roller coaster because it's not a risk in one way, but it's another risk emotionally because you're putting a lot of time into a company, and if something does go wrong, it really affects you. You know, it's really quite hard. But I never regretted it. I never regretted it. It was the best experience of my life, and I think anybody who has the opportunity to go to a startup, they should really try to think about it. I think it's amazing the amount of things you can get done with so little resources when you have so many people motivated around a common goal. And that's the one thing about an internet company or a startup company. It doesn't even have to be on the internet. A startup company is that if you have a bunch of people who share the same passion and same vision, you can do anything.
Right, right. How did you manage to have this mindset? I mean, approaching failure like an experience that you've learning from.
I don't know. I think when you're faced with failure and it hits you in the face, you have no choice but to deal with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
having this mindset, I mean, being happy about it, and I'm sure next time you will have this mindset. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna take the risk because no matter what, if I'm going down, it's gonna be another good thing for me. When you are young, of course.
I think it comes down to individual personalities. There's people who are depressed people. There are people who focus on the positives. I mean, if when a project fails, you take it to the point that you cannot look at the good points of it and learn from it, then you're destined to fail again. And I think, with every failure that happens, I've had lots of successes and I've had lots of failures. But with each failure, I've learned something to help grow for the next time, to be able to change and do things differently. So maybe it's just my personal personality that is a little bit more positive. But I think, generally speaking, people who take chances and take risks are people who can hopefully handle the idea of the potential failure, because it's going to happen. Nothing. There's no dream that over 100, everything comes 100% true. And if it did, it wouldn't be any fun.
Right, right. Did you have, so you had your network, but what about mentorship? Were you actively looking for people to reach out and ask questions and asking for help,
Mhm.
particularly when you're young? Did you had such opportunity to find people willing to help you throughout your career?
I have always been very fortunate.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do with luck. I mean, I had my internal inspiration in my family with my grandmother, who was very, very close, was very close to her. And the work aspect is that when I got hired in my first job here in France, is I was very fortunate to work for a very intelligent woman who more or less helped manage my career. Okay, when I say that is that she was a very effective manager. Uh, she was always present. She was willing to help, uh, give guidance, and she was also very strong in her ability to read, what we call reading people, understanding people's what they can and cannot do. And she effectively, at the beginning of my career, helped me by saying, I believe you can do this. And I was like, I can't do this. And she said, yes, you can. This is why. And then if I needed assistance or whatever, she helped me with the training or the right people. And I throughout my career, I've always fallen into a situation where I've had managers who were managers. They helped manage their teams, meaning myself and other people. And that's what I try to do as a manager, is that I spend the time to get to know each of my team members. First thing I did is I learned to do their jobs, because if you cannot do the job of somebody working for you, then it's going to be very hard for them to have some sort of respect. They'll just think that you're the manager and you don't want to do that. Second thing is I spend a lot of time getting to know the people. And then therefore you can help them you can help them develop even better. And I've been always fortunate to find these type of managers.
In my case, I had the luck to meet a really nice manager when I started off as a young professional. And I mean, I'm still paying dividends for the mentor that he has been to me. And I really consider it's super important having such people to guide you at the beginning, and not just at the beginning, but throughout your career. Yeah.
It's good. It's important. It's important to meet inspirational people, and effectively, each of my mentors, they inspired me for different reasons.
Yeah.
Even though I have changed companies and changed roles, I'm still in contact with them because they effectively impacted my life in a way that helped me become the person I am today, and also inspired me to be a manager like them, to help other people.
Right. So I had this conversation with one of my friends. What do you think is the difference between a manager and a leader? If you can point out any difference at all.
Well, the term manager means more or less you have people who work for you underneath you. A leader, you don't need to have anybody working for you. You get the whole world, behind you. There's an inspirational. People have a tendency to think that power means you have to have a large team. That's not true. It's your ability to influence others is far more important than the size of the team that you have behind you. I've gone from larger teams down to smaller teams, and I've never looked at the size being important. I've always looked at the fact is, what is the impact that I can have on the organization, and in my current role, on my clients. If I can have an impact on a client and not have anybody working for me, then I think I've done a good job. So a leader is somebody who understands that, and who is the ability to influence and bring people together.
Cool stuff, Mark. Really cool stuff.
Thank you.
I really appreciate being so candid on my podcast. And if you want to share some knowledge to your younger self or to young graduates out there, what's one piece of advice you would have to give to share with them, especially in this context of COVID-19 and
yeah. Well, this sort of goes with COVID then. I think in the sense that as long as you're breathing, you can always reinvent yourself.
As simple as that, yeah.
Simple as that, because you know what? Careers can be in the same company for 40 years of work. If you have a great company, you can do that. But you can also do 4 different types of careers, 10 different types of careers in your lifetime, because we as human beings, we change. Our tastes change, our desires change. So what we might have had a desire to do when we're 20 might not be the one that we have at 40. And maybe you want to change and do something. Don't be afraid to do that change, to take the change, because you can reinvent yourself. You can pick up and do new things. And some people will be very happy to stay in the same city all their lives, and they'll be content. And I do not judge that person. I was a different type of person. I wanted to pick up and find something different, and I did. And I think that people, each of us are very different. You're different than I am. A young lady on listening to the podcast might be different from another person living far away. But the fact is that we all have the opportunity to do great things. We just have to take the time and think about it and find something which makes us happy. And happiness is very important, because if you do not like what you're doing, don't do it, because you're gonna suffer. You're gonna suffer some ways. You're gonna stress. You're gonna be tired. You're gonna do things. You're not gonna be happy. And life is too short. When you're breathing, you can do whatever you want. You can pick up. You can leave. You can go backpacking if you want to. And just, I would say, don't be afraid. Some people are afraid. It's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. I don't think you'll ever regret it.
In my case, I think it's a risk not taking the risk.
True, true.
But how do you build such a framework to take the right decision? Of course, there's no right or wrong decision, especially for younger people. I mean, this could be tough. This could be really tough. Yeah. I mean, how do you build yourself the values, the frameworks to take decisions at any point in life?
I think it's based on experience, unfortunately. I think
We don't have experience, Mark.
yeah,
People like
exactly.
me, we don't have.
But this is what happens: is that you said it. Not taking a risk is a risk in of itself. I think that it all goes back to how you're brought up and what your goals are. Okay. I don't really know how to answer that question because it's very different for each person. For me, if I look at it when I came here, as I said, we were a bunch of students. I was more or less the only person that stayed in France. All the other people went back either to their home countries or the US. The people who went back to the US, I'm sure they make much more money than I do, probably. However, as you said, the quality of life was the difference. They aren't necessarily happy. They have less vacation time. They have all this type of thing, and they have less good wine. You know, even though the wine in California is good, but I think it comes down to the choice, and each of us make our choices on different reasons. My choice was to, as you said, pick the quality of life. I prefer the Mark that lives in Paris than the Mark that was living in New York. New York was far too fast and running and paced. Paris is a much slower pace, much more enjoyable. And that was my decision. And my decision was based on my experience. And my experience was I lived in New York. I lived through the stress. And then I saw what was happening to me. And I came here and it was my experience that told me. And I think that each of us, you know, you've lived now in several countries, and you've decided, you made a choice for yourself to take the quality of life and are staying here in France anyhow for right now because you like it. But that's because of your experience. And I think
Right.
you know each one, even somebody who's never left their hometown or whatever, they do have a structure that they've built in a framework to make these types of decisions. Now, then they have the psychological aspect. Are they willing to take the risk? How risk adverse are they? These are all very hard things to put into words, though. Family. The fact is that, you know, that also plays a very important role in your development and your choices. Some families are very close. Other families are less close. Culturals also brings into that. You know, we're like in Asia, the families all live together. In America, it was our habit at 18 years old, all of the children would move away to go to college. So we picked up when we crossed the United States, which is like crossing a continent, because it was still in the same country. So, you know, those things are which were for me are, you know, are very different. I was coming from my part of the culture where I had a strong family, but it was in our nature to pick up and move. My parents are immigrants, so they had left their home country, which was Ireland, to go to the U.S. And then, you know, it was normal in me at 18 to pick up and go to California for university, and then go back to live in France, to the old world, as they used to say, leaving the new world for the old world. So, you know, family does play a role as well as the culture. Some families are very close, and that the people need to stay local, and that's fine. That's respectable as well. But they all of these psychological things play a role on a person's choices and development. And this is where people need to sit down and really think about what they want to do, because ultimately it all impacts everything that we do.
Thanks again, Mark.
You're very welcome.
Being so candid over here. We touched really cool subjects. Your background is impressive.
And thank you for your time. It was really interesting for me too. It's a pleasure.